Welcome to the first episode of Orchestral Music Production Learning by Comparison. In this series, I will be discussing a wide variety of orchestral music productions made with virtual instruments. And the productions that I will be analyzing will be on very different levels, from beginner level over to intermediate level, and then all the way up to very advanced, or even what I would be considering is to be a master level production. Now, the most important thing about this series is that I will not just be analyzing these productions. I won't just be talking about them. For each and every of the productions that will be presented in this series, I will create a comparison production of my own. And the whole purpose of this is for me to demonstrate what I think can be done differently, what I believe can be done better, and sometimes it will just be about taking a different musical approach to something that I already think is masterly done. And the second most important aspect of the series will be a strong emphasis on musicianship and attention to musical detail. So the first piece that I will be analyzing for this first episode of the series is a piece by a young media composer, Kevin Olsson. The piece is called Winter, and Kevin posted this piece on the VI Control forum looking for some feedback. So I responded, and Kevin and I engaged in discussion. And then when Kevin asked me about clarification on some of the comments I made, I thought to myself, okay, instead of responding verbally, why don't I just take the excerpt that I was referring to and make a production of my own in order to demonstrate what is it that I actually mean by this. Kevin's piece is, in my view, more on the side of a media music piece than on the side of a classical music piece. So I also decided to give my demonstration production more of a media music sound aesthetics. This is also going to become important when we come to the discussion of what I call the poetic space of a piece. The instruments used in my productions are Synchron Strings Pro, some of the Studio Series instruments, and the wonderful Studio upright Bechstein piano. In my comparison analysis of this piece, I will be focusing on three aspects. First one, structural transparency. The second one, unity of expressive purpose. And the third one is poetic space. And the poetic space aspect will have two parts to it. Before we continue, a short announcement for Vienna Symphonic Library Synchron series strings users. If you're interested in learning how to make the best out of your Synchron series strings libraries work, check out my new Synchron Strings entry-level course. You can find all the details on the Art of VSL webpage. The link is in the video description below. And now let us first take a listen to Kevin's original version and then to my comparison demonstration version of this excerpt. the very first thing that one should, I believe, be noticing when listening to these two versions in comparison is that it is much more difficult to discern different structural elements of the piece in the first version than it is in the second. Due to the overall sound of the original version, having this kind of an almost organ-like, undifferentiated, pad-like quality to it, it is quite difficult to discern the different structural elements of the piece. Everything is kind of very strongly blended together, but not in a good way. So while it is possible to perceive what the main melody should be, what is the accompaniment and the bass line, yes, one can hear that, these elements of structure aren't sufficiently sonically separated in the original version. So the very first place where I would begin to improve such a production would be making the delineations between different structural pillars of the piece much more sharp in their contours, that I have a clearer musical understanding of where the melody is, of where the bass line is, and where the intermediate voices and or filling harmonic voices are. Now, structural transparency isn't there just for its own sake. So now that we have discussed this first point, what I would like you to do is to listen again, section by section, to the original version and to my comparison demonstration version, but now from the standpoint of really paying attention to, of really consciously listening to how bringing out the structural transparency of the piece serves bringing out its musical intention, its musical sense and meaning more to the foreground. The second aspect of structural transparency has to do with giving your orchestral colors sharper contours. So when we listen to the original version, the timbre of instruments is also kind of blended together in a way that makes the whole sound image timbrally transparent as well. So I don't know if you were able to notice this when you were listening to Kevin's original version, but this excerpt is actually also scored for example, 2 trumpets. Now, when I was listening to this excerpt for the first time and I had no foreknowledge of this I actually wasn't thinking that I was hearing any trumpets, more something like a badly sounding oboe or oboes in unison playing in the background. So the second very important aspect of structural transparency is making sure that the orchestrational elements, the timbral components of your piece actually have the opportunity to be perceived as such. So now again, please take a listen to the same excerpt, original version, my comparison version, section by section, but now try to listen consciously to how well can you hear the different timbral orchestrational components of the piece in these 2 excerpts. A note on orchestration. You have probably noticed that I have changed the orchestration of this excerpt. So if you want to find out why and how is this related to the whole concept of the poetic space of a piece, watch the full video in the Art of VSL school. If you sign up, you will find the full video in the free learning materials repository. And it doesn't matter if you are using Vienna Symphonic Library instruments or not. These videos are meant to be of use to virtual instrument production artists completely independently of which instruments and libraries they are using in their own work. Unity of expressive purpose. The second major issue that I believe one will hear when one listens to these two excerpts in comparison is that the dynamic behavior in the original version tends to be often quite erratic in a sort of arbitrary way, and that there is an overall feeling, an overall impression of different parts of the orchestra, different players and sections not really communicating with each other. They're not really listening to each other while they're playing, and they're not really united in a common sense of performing this piece with a unified expressive purpose. And this is most directly heard in the absence of a sense of direction over sections within this excerpt. So when I'm listening to the section A, for example, of the original version, I do not have the sense that it is imbued with an overarching direction, that there is an overarching formal phrasing of some kind that is applied to that section. And the same is the case with the second section of the excerpt as well. The other issue is that very often the individual instruments and sections themselves will have dynamic shaping on them which feels kind of jagged and jumping, bumping in a sort of an arbitrary way. So one doesn't have the feeling that this dynamic behavior is intentional. There is more of a feeling that it is kind of coincidental and arbitrary and doesn't really follow a thought out concept of what expressive intentive phrasing would be. And again, just as with structural transparency, phrasing and formal phrasing isn't there just for its own sake. Try to listen to how the presence of intentional phrasing and formal phrasing contributes, again, to the overall musical sense and musical intention, the musical essence of the whole piece being brought out more. In the final two parts of the video, I will be discussing the poetic space and specifically the aspects of orchestration and spatialization of using the acoustic space as a means of delineating a piece's poetic space. So if you want to find out more about how thinking about your production through this lens, through this notion of the poetic space can be useful and helpful for lifting the overall musical level of your production, watch the complete video at the Art of VSL. You will find the video in the free materials section. I hope you found this comparison analysis useful, and I'm looking forward to seeing you the next time. Take care.